Welcome back to the Karen K for day 2 of Grandma's dill pickles. We're getting ready to pack these all up and process them and put them on our shelf for later this winter. So the first thing that I did this morning is from our day 1 is we took those pickles and we put them underneath that saltwater brine and we covered it with ice, and then we covered it with a plate and we pushed that plate down to make sure that those pickles were all going to stay underneath the water. And we let that rest for about 12 to 18 hours. You don't want to do it any more than 24 hours, but keep it between the 12 and 18 so they don't get too soggy. So I took those out this morning. I had those in my refrigerator. I had a big enough spot for that big aluminum pan. And you do want to use an aluminum pan or a glass pan of some type, something that's really big. And I took those out. I rinsed them really good. And then I sliced them into quarters. So I have my whole colander here full of slices that are of a quarters of those beautiful dill pickles. So we're all ready to put these into the jars. The first thing I also did this morning was to take my hot water bath and get that going. So what I try to do with this is I put this and I get it not boiling or roaring. I get it up to 180 degrees, and that way I have my jars, when they come out of the oven, that are hot, and I fill them. I put them into the hot water bath that I'm going to use to process them to keep them warm. But it's suggested that you bring it to 180 degrees. So let me talk a little bit about also preparing your jars. We have pint jars that we're using today. These are wide mouth jars. And so there's a lot of talk about, sterilizing your jars, making sure they're clean. One thing that I learned this winter when I took the pasteurization and the acidified class from NC State to get my certification in canning was that I was talking with Nick. He's a professor there at NC State. I had a bunch of questions after the class was over with, naturally. A lot of it was about acidity and canning, water bath versus pressure gauge, when you use it, when you don't use it, when it is very essential. And he talked to me a little bit, we got off subject about sterilizing jars. And I said, well, yes, I always put mine into a big pot and sterilize them. He says, Karen, there's no need for that. He says, let's cut your time down on your canning. He says, what sterilizes your jars is this hot brine that goes into it. That's going to sterilize the jar immediately. He says, what you want to do with your jars is naturally, when they come from a store, they're pretty clean. You take the lid off and the ring around it, and they're pretty clean jars. He says you just want to make sure there's no debris in there. You can rinse them out. It doesn't matter. He says, but you don't need to sterilize them. So there's a little tip that I learned by taking this class. And if we really want to learn some really good takes, take that class. It's amazing. There's 9 different modules in it, and you read a lot about what you need to know and what you don't need to know about canning. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this brine that I made this morning for it. I went ahead and made the brine, got that all ready, got it nice and hot. This is the recipe will be in my description below, but this is the water that was divided. We used, I believe there's 8 cups in here. And then I used 4 cups or 6 cups, can't remember, of vinegar. I followed the recipe. And then I added my spice bags to it. So these are our spice bags. These are Cheescloth spice bags that you can buy online. I'll put the link down there. Or you can use just regular cheesecloth. And then I used the regular pickling spices by ball. I have those here somewhere. They're hiding around somewhere. But they are the, there's some here. Don't know where they went. Maybe I used them all. But I used the ball pickling spices to put into my cheesecloth bag, and you'll put that into your brine, and you will let that boil. Bring it to a boil, bring it to a hard boil, and let it boil there for 15 minutes, and let those pickling spices just ferment into this brine. That's what's going to make these dill pickles taste so good. So let's get on to doing what we need to here in this jar. So what I've done here at the bottom is I've added a clove, one of the cloves of garlic, and this is a really unique type of garlic that I bought this time, and I didn't ever really realize there was all these different varieties of garlic. And I went out to Ford's Produce, and she was packing up some of this garlic, and it was so tiny and it was so small, and I said, good grief, what is that? And she said, this is called elephant garlic. And so it's a little bit of a different color. It's kind of a purple color. Kind of looks a little bit like that. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's kind of a purple color when you peel it, and it's a little bit smaller, but the smell of it, to me, was just a little bit stronger, and I love garlic, so that's what I bought. Again, they're called garlic, elephant garlic. You wouldn't think that they're elephant garlic because they're actually smaller than some of the big garlic heads. So I've added a tablespoon of dill seed, and I've added a teaspoon of mustard seed. And if you don't have dill seed or you can't find it at the grocery store, you can always use dill heads or dill weed to substitute for that. But because I love dill so much, I am going to also add 2 sprigs of these dill heads to the bottom of my jar. And then we're going to go ahead and pack the jar really tight. And so what you can do with this jar is a little bit warm, but I'm going to hold on to it just so I can show you this. But you're going to take your jar and just start to put your dill pickles in like that. Sometimes it's better just to lay it and do it. You can lay it down like this and just start packing your pickles in there. So I'm just going to hold on to it here and see if I can get these nice and tightly fit in here. And why you did take, I take my jars and I put them in the oven to get them nice and warm. But if you don't want to put them into the oven, you can just put them in a hot water bath, like I was saying, when you want to sterilize them, and just pull them out of the hot water bath. It doesn't matter. You just want your jars warm when you're filling it with these pickles, and you also want it warm when it goes into the hot water boiling bath. And why is that? Because you don't want a cold jar exploding in there. A lot of times you'll see the bottoms of them, they burst out, and that's what will happen. So once you get your jar really, really tightly packed, it doesn't have to be super, super tight, but I like to try and get in as many as I can in one jar. So that way I'm not gypping my customers. You want to take your brine, take your canning funnel, put it over there, and you want to fill it with brine up to a 1/2 inch headspace. You want to leave a 1/2 inch headspace, so kind of watch it there because your canning thing is sitting on top of it. So we're at a 1/2 inch right now, but then what your next step is, you need to release some of the air bubbles in here. So I take a butter knife because it's not sharp, and I just stick it down, or you can take the knife this way and just stick it down, or they do make tools, I will put that in my description below, that you can use for canning that will help you release those. And so if your level has gone down before that 1/2 inch headspace here, you're going to want to add a little bit more brine to this. And then your next step is to take a piece of cloth, a little damp cloth, and wipe that rim really good. You don't want anything on that rim. And then you're going to take there's my rim, and you're going to stick that rim right on there, and then you're going to put your rim around there, and then you're going to take your jar grabbers and you're going to lower this into your hot water bath. And keep it nice and warm until you get the rest of your jars filled. And that's what you have to do to get those dill pickles processed. So I hope you've enjoyed this recipe. Again, you process it for 30 minutes on a hard rolling boil in your hot water bath canner or your water bath canner. I hope you have enjoyed this recipe, and I hope your dill pickles will turn out just like Grandma's.